it now. So
Yeah. Good. So
no one else.
yeah. So we
Henrik?
had we thought about what we should show this session, but then I think it was you, Henrik, that talked about the debugger features, and actually there has been some improvements to the debugger since it was shown last. I think it was shown, we had one of these sessions when we went through it in March or something like that. I think the video is on the blog. But a few new things, and also you, Lars, asked about debugging against the code rest from a turnkey site, and that might be, well, it's quite a few steps to go through, so it might not be the best scenario to show everything in a session like this, but I wrote up an article, and I'm going to talk through that one if there's time today. So let's start with the debugger things. So for this, I guess I'm just gonna use the standard. Oh, I don't present, do I? I should press your entire screen thing. And now you see my screen.
Yes.
So let's go with the standard. Maybe we should save it as something else to keep it from. Oh, there's plenty of samples. Let's do a subfolder. Like that. And just pressing play and having this on XML data and going into the debugger. There's a few new things, but to get to those I'm going to create some data. So let's grab this class thing, and we go to the seeker autoform created for that, and we have a button so that we easily can create instances of this, and the save button is highlighted like that. And now, as we had and this will be important for the other thing I'm going to show later, since we had an on update method implemented that set the change time, that was updated. The change time was updated as we saved. So if I create some new, this is empty initially, this one is actually set on create, so that's set immediately, but this one is empty until I save, right? So having data like this, it's can be frustrating to jump between its string representation of data and the objects, and that has always been a thing that one struggles with. Now I know that I have these objects, but maybe I had them somewhere else in an Excel file or a Word document, or not maybe Word, but a notepad or something like that. Or maybe I want them there, or maybe I want to look up these grids in some other system. So to facilitate this, we have the F4 key that switches between the row select, which is now, and of course I could select it like this and sort of paste it to a new notepad, and then I could sort of massage to get my grids, but it's much easier if I just can press F4, which is standard in many programs, to switch between row select and cell select, to actually just get these straight away, to have just those, or if, for that matter, if I wanted both columns, that would have been possible as well. But having these in this format, I then might want to have them back as objects, and how I'm gonna do that. Well, now it's not an issue because we're in one system, but potentially we had another system that has the same grids, or I'm interested in knowing if these grids are available in that system. So of course you could do an OCL to look them up, but that would be a lot of text. So we added this little button, Excel clip, to M1. And the M1 are actually the same on M1, M2 and M3, just a memory, a simple variable that you can use if you have something like an expression. All instances of thing, and you select, oops, that was a double click. And you have the selected ones here, and you select M1. The M1 variable is updated to a, that was strange. So this is actually not working the way it should. So okay, we might have a problem, but the thing is that we wanted this button. It was because I had something in the clipboard buffer. If I just, I'm just gonna find out why it behaved strange. No. The thing is that if we select these and press this one, the aim was to, and it actually doesn't work. That's magnificent. So something happened that I'm not thinking. Well, as you hear, I'm a bit stumped. Looks like everything didn't make it into the build. So I'm gonna do a take a wild guess that I have it in just to show the point, so we can get on with it. So what I'm doing now is building the MDriven designer from scratch to see if the bug is present also in so this one needs to be started as administrator. Sorry about this.
Should I make a note that this selection to M1 has an issue?
Please do. And working on it. And we're going, and Now it started as in Mocha type mode, but that I can switch off and I can find my okay. So yeah, this was the one. So let's try. I copy the grids and I press yeah, it could be this also, me remembering wrong, because Excel has its own slightly own which is mostly standard, of course, since Excel is everywhere, clipboard format. So if I have them from Excel, now I got the M1 collection with 11 items in them, string items, and what that does for me is that I can list the M1 and see that these are the grids. They're actually shown twice here just because it's a simple element collection. First it's value, and then as it would be if we just treat it as self, and since it's a simple value it's the same. But this allows us to do things like collect over M1, which now are grids. And let's say that we were to take there's an operator which I can't remember on top of my head for looking up external objects from ID. So
Isn't it just called external ID?
That's the one to get the ID, but the other way around. Oops. Type,
I'll have a look.
External. Oops, I should have looked up this before. External ID. And also there's a combination of, that's something I'm aiming to fix, that the type operators doesn't show their values because, or their possible, otherwise.
Object from external ID.
Object from external ID, and then the X is a grid, and of course the grid is not an external ID, but that's also one of the changes that we made to the framework, that and that change has been available for quite some time, that if your model follows this basic pattern that has a superclass with a grid, that grid, if you send in a grid to object from external ID, we will recognize that it isn't a plain integer, and we will check the model if it has this grid property, and if it does, we will try to look up the object from that. And that's no guarantee, of course, but since most models that follow this pattern benefit from having this ability, that's what we have done. So, and
I thought everything had to have a grid.
no. So that's totally optional, but as we have in... we talk quite a bit about this in the...
Strongly recommended because it's a really good pattern, and but it doesn't. That doesn't mean that you have the GUID as the primary key, right? Because that's super inefficient.
Yeah.
So the integer is this primary key, and then you have a GUID to be sure that you have a really good reference when you're talking to any other system or for your own reference.
Yeah. So we talk about this in this article, information hygiene, just to make sure to what you probably always should have available if you hope to integrate with other systems in the future, because the GUID is super perfect when taking data out from your system, doing something else with it, and then having the need to somehow find a way back. And without the GUID, it's almost impossible to do anything efficient. But what we did now was to actually just grab the a pack of values, and of course this could have been any value from Excel, and iterate over them, since we got them into the M1 variable really easily with this new button. And we collected over the GUIDs and looked up the objects, so now we have the objects again. So this is a very practical way going back and forth between lists of stuff and objects. So it's not necessarily only the GUID. You can look up on other properties as well, and or assign values. Suppose that you have you can do like this in Excel, right? If you mark it and then drag, if you have something like this and you have these values in M1, and of course those could be collected over and assigned to the thing objects as a number of some sort. So it's quite good to be able to go back and forth.
Hans,
Yes.
is it possible to just get one column on the result set? Is it best that if you only have one value?
No, but the F4 works here as well, so you can switch to F4. Or what was it?
If you do only every one value, you only get two columns. Can you make some expression to just get one?
Yeah, I haven't investigated, but since we add the self, we could probably remove that and to just show the one column, if this is confusing.
So sometimes you want to copy the stuff out.
Yeah, and then the F4 now is real good for that.
And what does that for do?
So F4 switches to cell select, so you can copy that.
Okay. Great.
To just get...
Before, was it even possible to copy? Because I tried that some months ago and it didn't work.
So whatever you want to get, you can.
Great. In that example, you have the external ID in that form instead.
Yes.
And you could use those, of course, also then as an external ID in this object from external ID function.
Yeah. And if I had that, I could go to clip one, and then I can go back here and look them up that way. That wouldn't be the same result.
So that's what you talked about earlier, that this object from external ID, it analyzes what kind of external ID that you actually paste in there.
Yes.
And tries to do the best that it can with it.
So one issue with or one caveat with the external ID is that it's combined of the the class number and an exclamation mark and then a running number that's assigned. But the first 9 here is because we happen to have, or thing is the number 9th class in our model. So this is all good up until you add another class that sort of topologically gets in front of this, and then thing will be number 10. So these are quite volatile. So and as we're doing a lot of web and maybe doing QR codes of the IDs and hard links into deep linking into system, it will be really troublesome to use this form of identity in a printed QR code. And for that reason, the GUID is much better, but an easier, simpler form is to also allow for a GUID form that doesn't use the number, but instead use the name. So you could sort of, let's say if I Excel, if I had it like that, and now I have M1 as 2 different IDs like this, I could hopefully send those into object from external ID to get those 2 objects. So that's a more time independent form of expressing the identity. In the database, as the foreign or as the primary key for these objects, it's only stored the second part here. But in order for us to resolve inheritance and subclasses and superclasses of things, we really need to get some discriminator to be able to look it up from a database where you might have put all the subclasses in different tables. So that's just a technical issue.
Is it possible to change to use the GUID instead of the external ID in the routing?
Nope. You can use the GUID in the routing, but you will the system turnkey will not use the GUID. It will revert back to this form.
Yeah. So if you want to hide it, that you can enumerate those IDs.
Mm-hmm.
So then you need to rewrite or change the routing in the Angular.
Yeah, but that's the same thing for every system. So you can enumerate them. If you see 9 exclamation mark 0, you can guess there's a 9 exclamation mark 1, but not necessarily, because this number is not. I just created them in order, so they happen to get this series now. But number 1 might be a totally different class. So
it's a global counter in this case.
yeah.
But it's also ranked about performance, because if we were to allow routing with GUIDs, it would take a huge performance hits probably, because it's very much slower to look up a GUID from a database than an integer. So that's one of the reasons why it's a bad idea. But then if you send in an external ID like a link, that's a different story, right? Because then you actually want to not be able to guess it. But you shouldn't really anyway rely on. You shouldn't rely on the URL being not guessable. So use the access groups for that instead.
Yeah, so the thing to stop bad behavior is to set an access group on the either an access expression on the view model or an access group on the view model that checks. So what's the difference between the access groups and the access expression? The access groups, they are sort of you don't have the context for the root object. So in order to be able to, maybe you, Bengt, are allowed to see a few things, but not all things.
Yeah.
And then I can have an expression that says that you can see things that you own, that a logged in user owns, but not others.
Okay.
For example, a seeker needs to be protected by an access group, not an access expression, because usually you don't have a seeker don't have a root object, so you don't have a way to construct the expression for a seeker. Seeker is usually then protected by a access group.
Yeah. So switching to F4 to have the row select again. If I, of course, the results that I get from this view brings up the default generated forms that has all the properties, and the single links are rendered like this, and then there's a button for all the multi-links or the many links that will end up in a tab like that on the same form, and then you can add new into that multi-link like this. And if I do that on 0 as well, that was the 0 one, okay, and then on the 10 I'm gonna show something. Details. So we have several tabs here that are good for different things. You can grab an object in this list, or you can grab an object on this green dot on its form, and then when you, well, now that was in front of everything. Let's do it like this. I'm going to take that one, and you can assign it to one of these tabs. So drag object here to assign a root. So I'm just going to drop it on this tab, and then I got the root, so now it's rooted in thing, and then this combo box is reduced to the view models that are typed with thing. So I can see view one thing, and this tab is just showing the data that's expanded as a tree, follows the view model, and these are all the enable and read-only expressions. And then we have the data from the object, and in this case I did some details, so we get one for each detail we created. But it's easier to see if we would to drag it to this one, view model UI instead. Now it's hooked up to that one, and view one thing, and now I see the rendered view model, which I can interact with directly. So this is quite good if you want to figure out how stuff works. So this follows all the rules that you have defined in the model. And if you see stuff here that you don't really understand, you might want to further debug stuff, and then you can clone all the view model variables that are defined here as of now. So let's see, if I select this row, the v current details should be connected to this one. So, and I get all the variables added up here. V current details is connected to a detail. And then I can go on and figure out what that meant to me by executing that and seeing just that. And if I click up that object and change that to something else, I would expect that this one follows to show me that. I would have expected that one to follow. Detail 2. Oh no, I'm on this one. I need to check myself. Yeah. So these are connected that way. These forms get different colors, and the colors are taken from the colors you give the classes in your model. So that will help you to keep track of stuff when you're working. Right, and so that was the tree view and the view model view, but you can also do this for JSON. So if you grab, well, never mind that. We're gonna do one of the things. I'm gonna drag that one to the JSON, and now that's connected to it, and I can choose one of the view model definitions to get everything as JSON instead. So this is the data, and here everything is hooked up, and I can apply this if I wanted. So if I change this and apply this, now I applied it, I didn't merge it. So this Tyson works like that it if it doesn't find the key, and the key is always the first attribute, and since this only had one attribute, it was the first. If it doesn't find the exact match, it assumes it's a new one, and then a new row was added. It will be, I guess, if you were to do it like, yeah, never mind that right now. So there's you can work with just getting all the data as JSON, and when you do that, it's easy to switch to another format like a WordPad or Notepad or something to work with the data to and then just paste it back and apply it to have the value updated. Yeah, 34 as I wrote there.
So this is for example, API development or API debugging, because you use Tyson and apply JSON and merge JSON and all those functions. So this is a way to have some interactivity when looking at an API or testing. And
yeah. So, and also if you do like a service-oriented architecture with a lot of small systems talking to each other, you always need to exchange these kind of documents, and you need to figure out if something has been added or something has been removed and in what order, etc. And Tyson is brilliant for that. It works really simplistically on the first, assuming the first attribute in a sublist is the key. And if you follow that rule, you will be able to merge and match anything, sending data back and forth and growing data and shrinking data as you see fit. So that's good. And of course, Tyson also works as XML if you prefer that.
And if you want to get into how to use Tyson for this, you can also look in the wiki, because you can express special rules for Tyson in your view model. So
Yeah.
depending on how the view model, I mean, this was the basic, like out of the box, but then you can add more information. For example, here is improving performance if updating an existing large data set. We don't want to load 1 million objects into memory, so there are ways to make that more efficient. And there's some optimization things that are doing inside it.
So it's mostly things that are needed to be adjusted when you write things back, and you want some precision when you're writing things back. But there's also tweaking to do when you pull things out, because sometimes you need to tweak the resulting JSON to match some other service. Good. And as we are here and we look at data, one thing that I had a lot of fun doing, but I feel that it hasn't got too much attention, is the tetrahedrons to show. I had this vision that it's when you have a lot of objects in your database, and you need to get a feel for them, how they connect and relate to each other. So one way of doing that would be to have them in a sort of a 3D space to see how what they are and how many they are, and watch some kind of property on them. So there are actually two ways to address this, and I'm gonna show you both of them. The first one is just the tetrahedrons from the current result. So what we got now was these as one tetrahedron each, just following the list. And if I right click on one, I can see, well, first I see what kind of class it is, and also the color on the tetrahedron matches the color on the class that I defined, and the form is injected into this menu as well, so you can actually see all the properties and follow links, and also potentially change objects. But you can also follow one separate link at a time. So if I want to follow to the details now, it folded out perpendicular to where I was, all the details. So that and if I click one of those, I can see, and I can set the details. This is one of them, and since this was yeah, I'm gonna find that one. Wasn't that? Oh, and I can see that was probably the last one. So if I click up the last one, this is one of them. So, and suppose that you have a lot of stuff, and now you can fold things back. So from this detail, I could potentially follow back to thing to get one thing, and that's the same thing as that one. It's no really good way to tell, but you can build a whole complete object space from following relations like this, and if you follow all relations on everything, you will get a clue. It's one way to walk the object graph to see, to get a feel for how things are connected, how many things there are in links, etc. So that's pretty cool to use potentially when looking through data. So that's one way to use the tetrahedron's view space. And there's another way that actually use some expressions. And I can add multiple expressions. So I have had a hard time to explain the brilliance of this approach, but I'm gonna take another stab on it. So let's see. If I do thing all instances here, for example, and I need to press this one. I got 10 things, I guess. So we have them here, and the color of the object is grabbed from the class again, unless I added an expression to send in some other definition of color. So this doesn't help me much, but as you can see, they are a bit scattered around in this space because the X, Y, and Z properties are set to random 10. And of course, there's nothing strange about that. If I set them to random 100, they will be stretched out over a much larger area like this. So what can I use it for? Well, you could send in any expression here. So let's see. Remember, I created the thing objects in sort of batches and then saved them. So I guess the change time as ticks would be one property, but that's probably super large, so I'm gonna divide that a lot. And I'm gonna divide them with something more.
Is ticks really that big?
No.
Maybe it's 0 all the time now, but then they should show up in the middle maybe.
Yeah. So let's see. Let's see, what did it say? Change time. Okay, I'm gonna
It's too big. Yeah.
yeah. Okay,
Brilliant.
this one is too big. Yeah. So I'm gonna let's divide it like multiple times instead, because so now we got a value, but that might be really close to, so yeah, one good
It's
thing
like
would to
that-
be subtract something from it, right?
Yeah.
That would be much better. So let's do the the change time will always be larger than the create time.
Perhaps if you made it a non-integer value by putting 0.0 after the thing, and then it won't.
That would probably be it.
Integer.
But this one will probably be pretty small. And we're gonna mult that with something instead. Yeah, this is going well.
When it's a time span, you can use total minutes or something like that.
Correct. Cool. So never mind the ticks because they are hard to figure out. If we have a time span, we can do seconds.
Total.
Seconds.
Hey, the time expert. Looking man.
So now let's see. I'm gonna do all these along the same. Yeah, what happens if we do it like this? Oops, not A1. So, and now I can see, so imagine that I had a lot of data. Now I can see that the save has been done in 2 batches with my eyes. And potentially if I have multiple expressions, like add another expression, and I'm gonna do like detail.
This wasn't that it was saved in 2 batches, right? This is that it was different time between how many.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
wait
yes.
between create
Since
and
we did
save.
the details now. So
How slow the user was. This is a user slowness graph.
yeah, correct. But since you could use any expression that ends up as a number, you and you have to push that one to make them active. And then I'm gonna do this one as 2. So the details were all very close together, but oops. And this is actually quite, we have a couple of them over here as well. You see? This is very good to find correlation between things that your brain doesn't pick up on. So think that you have a log of a million different things, and you know there are the difference between things, and you have the times for everything, but you can't see any correlation. If you draw them up in a graph like this and put them next to each other, you immediately, your visual cortex of the brain will pick it up in an instant, and there will be no problem to see if things sort of correlate, I believe. So, pretty cool, right?
Yeah, I need to wrap my head around what it's supposed to do for me, but at least it works.
Yeah. So if we wouldn't have the create time, we could have like a fixed time here then. Or not fixed time, but the same time for everyone.
Whoa. It went over out.
It's negative.
Good.
Time, you remove the E, the other one.
will divide that by 10. Now I see those. I'm going to divide those by 10 as well. So now I know when they were sort of
This would be like a
changed.
a graph of creation,
Of
how many objects.
yeah,
were
relative
created.
change time. So and if I were to click that one up and do a simple change, and yeah, say that it won't jump immediately. I need to press this one, but now, yeah, now it's over here, and I guess, yeah, they will move because time goes on.
I have a quick question relating to accessing this new modern debugger compared to the old MDriven debugger when actually running an application, a WPF application. Is it possible? I mean, I haven't tried recently, but historically I've only been able to invoke the old MDriven debugger and not this new version of the debugger. Is it possible to get this new one?
Yes. So it's in the VPF, Eco VPF assembly.
Okay.
And it works pretty much as the old debugger with the integration, and you can find it there. I might not have written anything about it in the blog, but in the wiki, but it's...
No, I'll be able to find it. Maybe I just haven't looked recently enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
So at least I think this is cool. I too haven't, hand on heart, found extremely many use cases for it, but at least it was something that popped up in my mind, and in that sort of way that I couldn't let it go before I had tried it. So now it's here, and if anyone finds use for it, knock yourself out. And you could have like how many expressions like these you need to find correlation between things. Right. Good. So that concludes the stuff. Oops, time up. What I wanted to say a few words about, but we might have run out of time, was the new blog post that I wrote just today, because this was all about accessing data that you have, but debug can mean so many different things. And one of the things that you want to do when you debug is to actually step code, and the code that you have written in CodeRes, and you might inject it into Turnkey, etc. And then there's a good newly written article here on how to handle these 3 different scenarios and 1/4 that isn't described yet. So debug the Turnkey CodeRes with data from the MDriven server, and debug Turnkey CodeRes without round-tripping the code changes to the MDriven server. And debug and test your CodeRes code outside of Turnkey. So this is maybe, and this one is maybe you or maybe many of you want to start with this one to get things to get a feel for using the new possibilities in new MDriven. I guess I could just...
I was looking for it for when I was... I need a single-step code that generates documents and PDFs and things like that. And then you want an easy I mean, you need all your data, but you want a lightweight local thing for debugging and that. So
Yeah.
you want remote persistence, you could say, but local interactivity for debugging.
Yeah. So if you're not in Visual Studio MDriven, the latest versions, it's quite easy to get here, and it's sort of described in this debug article as well, how you would create an ecospace in a model and how you would in this case also connect the ecospace to the MDriven server. And once you're there, I've created a very simple VPF app with just one button that says click, and what that does is create the ecospace and then calls a method do stuff, and the do stuff activates the ecospace and gets all the instances of thing, iterates over them and runs method 1. And method 1 of course is a method on your thing class, and it does some changes. So, and thinking of you, Lars, you can easily set up this kind of harness to really explicitly call a thing that you want to debug and be interactive. Because if you want to generate a PDF and you have trouble with it, you can just have your model here and do a button that calls just that specific method on that specific data, and your model can still be connected to your exact ecospace by having set up the persistence mapper web API client, pointing out your cloud-based MDriven server and the credentials, and put it as the persistence mapper. Then you go. And the great thing about having it this way is that once you step this code, the Visual Studio built-in edit and continue works, so you can change things here. And what happened there was that pressing F10 kills the recording in the Camtasia app, and F10 is the most common key when I debug in Visual Studio. So we're over time, sorry for that. I thought we would have plenty of time today, but apparently not. Questions, comments?
I will send you a couple of notes also about things that two things I wrote down.
Yeah, and don't be shy to raise your hand to if there's something specific that you want us to show. We just point us in the direction, and we'll do our best to make that happen. And it could be that we. So looking forward, we have the .NET 5 and .NET 6 things coming up, and we need to find a good way to switch over, and things will be easier once we are on the other side, because currently we have the issue with the bitness of the .NET Framework 4 and the core .NET Core not being equal, so we can't really use the core processes to consume code that has been compiled for .NET 4, and that sort of mess things up a bit for us in complexity when trying to describe how to debug these things. But that will be better once we're on the .NET 5. So hopefully we will move that there soon.
Do you know a timeline or not?
So it's basically up to finding a good spot at our current clients that we think that it will be easy for them to accept and make the transition, because we're too small operation to do it out of working hours. We need to do it for a real case, so to speak. So, but I expect it to be much work. It's just that if I do it now, there will be a lot of double maintenance, and that's what I don't want. Need to conserve.
So I'm expecting a move into MDriven, pretty heavily in the next 6 months, maybe 3 months, start the full migration of my code base. And so that kind of strategy is going to matter.
Yeah. So we haven't left anyone behind ever. So we don't expect to do this this time either. So we're not Microsoft.
I'm kind of behind, but that's probably more my fault.
There's still a path.
That's right. That's right. But and along those lines, I don't know, at some point, and I realize this is probably more of a private conversation, but it's when I get into that effort in full swing, being able to, get some consulting time from your team would be great. Obviously, we'll pay for it. We want to start up on the right step, and there's stuff, as we say in my business, you don't know what you don't know.
No. No, there's always a lot of unknowns when you start something like this, and you need to allot the time to handle them. I don't expect there will be anything that we can't handle, but exactly what those things are, as you say, we don't know. Yeah.
Exciting though.
Yeah, great. And great news. We're looking forward to your business helping you with that.
Yeah.
And maybe we need to send out a little teaser next time because we're usually more people in these meetings. I don't know, is it the autumn darkness that has...
Could be. So we got a few... yeah.
Autumn is coming. Winter is coming.
Winter is a great time to learn new coding techniques, so it's not a good excuse.
No. Okay, thanks everyone for showing up tonight, and see you hopefully in 2 weeks' time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hans.
Thanks.
Have a good evening. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.